All right, so we're recording, and let me set up the stream, which is going to take just like a hot second. Okay, stream group. Preparing live streaming preview. Live preparing. We will do a title. Okay, and it's really funny, there's a delay. Okay, that's fine. What did I call this event? I had a fun name for it. Staying Inspired Artistically in Theater with Brittany Adams Recupero. Calling it. Okay.
I sound so official.
Go live. Okay. Get ready. Setting up your meeting. It's always unclear if it's like really happening or if it's still setting up. So we're going to vamp for a hot second.
I like vamping. Vamping's fine.
Yes. Meeting is now streaming live on Facebook. Okay, fabulous. Okay. Hey, everybody, lovely writers, Write Yourself Free members, and others who might be watching wherever we share this video. Okay, I'm super excited because this month in Write Yourself Free, we are focusing on this concept I developed called creative cross-training. And the idea is how we use other forms of art and media to feed our writing practice and vice versa, right? So how do we create a life that is creative and we have all forms of self-expression and they all kind of feed and nourish each other. So that's what we're talking about this month. And next week, we're going to talk about music and theater. And so today, we have a very special guest, which is my amazing sister, Brittany Adams Recupero, who is an actor and a director. And we're going to talk all things theater and how she stays inspired and just about how to set up a creative life. So yay, this is so fun.
It is so fun. Hello, everybody.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for having me.
So start us off and tell us about how your love affair with theater began.
Wow. So I always, I don't know which one of it came first, but there's two very distinct memories from childhood that come to mind. The first one is the very first play I was ever in, which was at my kindergarten graduation ceremony. I was in The Gingerbread Man. And I played a cat and I had one line and it was, "Stop, stop, I want to eat you." And I was so excited. There was another kid also playing a cat with the same line and we had to say it together. And my teacher told me that I had to stop yelling. I was saying the line so loud. But it didn't matter. The second one is I remember loving Disney so much. So on certain days when I felt particularly performance ready, I would dress up in a Disney costume or something that looked like a Disney costume, put on a Disney movie, and then pick a character to act out what was happening.
So good. And you were what, 5? Like, what age is this?
4 or 5. Yeah. And it continued. I'm pretty sure that movie thing went on until I was about 10. Yeah. I would do it like at least twice a month. Oh my God. Probably more.
Probably more. So perfect. Okay, and tell us about, so I was remembering the play you were in with that guy, was his name Michael, who came and did the play with like all the young kids?
Yes.
And you were a wee one. So
yes. Yes. And it was always, every time it was said, it was, "We are wee ones." It was not, "We are wee ones." It was,
yes, wee ones. Wee.
Oh yes, but yes, I did plays with Michael. That was grade school. That was 1st to 5th grade. And then I guess I really started to harness my love of theater. I guess more so in middle school or like middle school age was when theater really became permanent with me. And I had my amazing director who then became my friend, Mrs. Tina McLaughlin, who was just so creative herself and very caring. And she and I had a very special relationship, and she really fed and nurtured that love for theater that I have now. So, but it's been a whole life
Yeah, a lifetime love affair. So tell us like maybe 2 or 3 of your favorite roles that you've ever played.
Okay.
2 or 3.
2 or 3. Yes, I know. These are in no particular order, honestly. My one role that comes to mind is Audrey in Little Shop of Horrors. I love that role since I was 8 years old. Mine and Brooke's cousin was Audrey when she was in high school, and we went to see the show, and I always had it in the back of my head. I got to play that role when I was 21, and that is how I actually met my husband. So it's also a very special memory.
Who played Seymour? Let's just,
Yes, he did. He played Seymour. So yes, Audrey and Seymour forever, literally.
Yeah, so just to be clear, so they met playing opposite each other in a romantic relationship, and now they're married. How long ago was that? Is it 8?
Almost 8 years.
Yeah.
Almost 8 years, and we'll be celebrating our 5th anniversary this October.
Oh, good. Audrey, obviously a favorite. What else?
Yes, obviously a favorite. Another one was a high school role that I played, actually. It was the role of Bessie in a play called Marvin's Room. And that was very challenging. And I was playing opposite my best friend Samantha, and we were playing sisters. And we were like estranged sisters. So we had to repair our relationship, and it was just a really interesting experience to get to have with her. Especially at that time, I was a senior, so things were changing, and it was a very cool thing, and another role I hold very near and dear to my heart. And then the last one is my most recent role and the last show that I was able to perform in before COVID, and that was Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, where I finally got to live my lifelong dream of playing a princess.
Literally the lifelong dream. So good. And that's the only one I haven't seen, which is kind of a bummer.
I have a video, so
We can sit down and watch the video one time. So this is interesting because I actually feel like, so I have a different, obviously different perspective. So I was thinking of Rizzo, who you played was it junior year of high school?
It was senior year. That was my senior year.
That was senior. Okay, because that was the spring, because that was the musical. That was one of my favorite roles, I think, of you, just because I feel like I just have a very clear image in my mind of you playing that role and just like really inhabiting it. And I felt like you would walk on stage as like, you were Rizzo, you were not Brittany. And so I feel like I remember that very strongly. And the other one is, and I can't remember the character's name, but when you were now I can't remember, you're in town.
Oh yes, Hope Cladwell.
It was just like, okay, so I think that was a special show because that was one of the first times I saw you star in a show like post school. So this was like after.
That was right after Little Shop too. They were.
Okay, so maybe right after Little Shop. So in any case, you were the star, and it was just like such a fun role. It's such a funny show, and I remember that was the first time I met Paul in the capacity that you guys were dating, and he of course directed that show, and I thought it was really well done. And I remember seeing Tina there, and she was just like, Brittany is brilliantly cast as Hope. She was just like, I would totally have cast her as Hope. It's so perfect. And I was like, I know. So much goodness.
So much.
Okay. So since we're on the subject of Tina, tell us a little bit about how you started directing and kind of how that came about.
Sure. So I had always, again, had somewhere in my mind that I would love to direct. Even being in Tina's shows from 6th to 8th grade, there were decisions that she would make that I would say in my head, like, oh, I would have done it this way. But,
oh, interesting. Can you give an example? Is there anything you remember that you could give?
Yes, I think it was when I was in The Little Mermaid. That was my very first lead that I ever had. I played the role of Ursula, and another family favorite amongst all of my relatives. And I remember there was the scene I was doing with Ariel. I think it was during Poor Unfortunate Souls. And this was even before the Broadway show came out. So putting Little Mermaid on stage was a very different kind of thing.
Yep.
And I remember doing Poor Unfortunate Souls with Ariel, and I was just singing it like normal Brittany singing it, and she stopped me and she was like, I don't want you to sing pretty. I don't want you to sing pretty. And I was like, okay, because her mindset was that Ursula was big and boisterous and powerful. And that was the way she wanted me to come across. So more in a sing-songy way. In my mind, I felt that the role was much more diva-esque, and she could have those shining moments of the beautiful voice, and that was okay. But in her way, she wanted to contrast Ariel's very I'm losing the words.
It's a totally fine
memorable voice with a voice that didn't sound anything like it. So that was one example I remember.
Yeah.
So there was.
That's really interesting. Okay, so I have two thoughts about this. One is like, I see your point totally, because then the whole part where like she captures Ariel's voice and then she sings it back, she has this like longing to have this beautiful voice, and like maybe her voice is the last beautiful thing about her. So that's like really interesting. So I am on board with your interpretation. But what I want to call attention to is that like so you were how old at this point? 7th grade?
12, 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're 12 years old and you're thinking to yourself, like, I actually think I know my character better than you, Mrs. McLaughlin, who's like an adult teacher. And what I think is so amazing about this is that like from a very young age, I would read books and be like, I don't know, I wouldn't end the book this way. Like I would do this instead, right? And so that like taking ownership of the story and like your interpretation of it, even as like a kid or like a middle schooler, I feel like is really important. And like we get to do that as creators, and sort of like take ownership of that. And I think that's really cool and important. So, okay. So from that age, you were like, I would do things differently. So, and now take us through kind of like what kind of brought you full circle to start directing with her.
Sure. Yeah. So I continued to do theater wherever I could. I never had the opportunity really to be on what I call the other side of the table, which is on the auditioner side of the table. Until it was a few years after I graduated high school. I think I had just been cast in one of like my very first shows outside of high school, and I was really excited about it. So I actually emailed Tina to ask if she would come and see the show. And I remember waiting for her response to come back, and I did. She answered me like the next day, which was awesome. And she was like, of course I remember you, how I could forget, because I had been out of middle school almost 10 years at this point. But she emailed me and she said, as much as I would love to come see your performance, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it. And that was when I found out that she had actually been, she had had a relapse of ovarian cancer. She had been diagnosed a few years before, gone through treatment and was in remission, but I just found out that it was coming back. So she at that time was going to treatments about 4 times a week. She was working as a full-time teacher, and she was directing a musical for 6th to 8th graders. And at that time, I was still living at my parents' house, and I was like, I'm right down the street. Is there anything I can do to help you? And I had planned, she asked if I would come in one day just to sit with her and be around the kids just as an extra set of eyes. And I literally planned to just go 1, maybe 2 days, and that would be it. And I would be a huge help. And I ended up going back to every single rehearsal that she had, and then being at both performances. And then after that was over, she told me the closing night of the show, she was like, you're not allowed to leave. She was like,
she got you for life.
She got me for life. So, I turned into her assistant director / choreographer. So if any of my former students that I did choreograph see this, I'm sorry, because that just wasn't something that should have happened, but it
Choreography is not one of your many, many gifts.
No. I can move. I can dance. I can't. But anyway, so we did 4 amazing productions together, and that was how she and I became friends, and we established this adult relationship. And then in the spring of 2015, we were producing the musical Aladdin, and right in the middle of it was when she got extremely sick. She was put into the hospital and was too sick to continue. So I took over the production of Aladdin, and it went up, and it was wonderful, a ridiculously bittersweet weekend for me, but she I knew she saw it. She had someone film it for her so she could see it while she was in the hospital. And then that was the year she decided to retire. And right when she made that decision, St. Albert's called me and offered me the job to be their musical theater director. So I've been there. This will be my 5th year. Knock on wood, hopefully. If COVID doesn't cancel our show again.
Yeah, totally.
Gosh. So that was how, so I started directing at St. Albert's, and then a few years later, I was sought out by a former student from St. Albert's who worked with Tina and myself, who was at high school at St. Hubert's, and they told me that their entire production team had given their notice and they were suddenly going to be without a theater department. So she asked if she could pass my name along to the administrators at St. Hubert's, and she did, and I got that job, and now I've been at St. Hubert's. This will be my 5th show with St. Hubert's this fall.
Yeah, so St. Hubert's being high school, Catholic high school, also in Philadelphia. Okay, so talk a little about, like, a lot of people do theater in high school and then, like, that's it. Like, they never do theater again. They never, like, I don't know, it just becomes like one extracurricular that they used to do and they don't kind of stay involved. So talk a little bit about how you and also Paul, like, are both super involved in theater, like acting in community theater, like directing for middle school, high schoolers, like directing community theater shows. Like, talk a little bit about, like, why you personally made that decision to, like, stay involved and, like, yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So theater was always, I knew from a very young age something that was very important to me. Originally, my dream was, Broadway and tour and be the star and win a Tony and do all of those things. But as I started to get older and I, was thinking about what I really wanted from life, things that I did really want, yes, was theater, but I also wanted friends and a house and a relationship and a family. Those were things that were also very important to me. So then I started to look for ways that I could have all of those things, but still keep theater a very close part of my life. So that was when I started looking around at local auditions around Philadelphia, seeing what I could possibly make happen in my hometown. So I could keep all of those things. And that was right around, the time when Facebook really took off and businesses were creating Facebooks and your parents were getting on Facebook. It was a very big deal. So a lot of community theaters then started their social media pages. So I started to follow a lot of those. And that was where I discovered a lot of my community theater roots. And my husband, Paul, was the same way. He started theater in high school and then actually continued through college and law school. He went to Villanova University for both undergrad and law school. And they have a awesome theater program over at Villanova. If anybody is local and, when they start putting stuff up again, I highly recommend. Even the student program at Villanova Theater is phenomenal. So Paul got very involved with the student musical theater as well as the graduate program theater, and did a lot of shows with Villanova, and then through Villanova found his community theater links as well. And then the thing with community theater is, especially around this area, I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but if you get into one, you meet all of those people and then they're all involved in another theater. So you go there and then they're all involved somewhere else. So then you go there. It's just a whole big circle of amazing people who work in a lot of different places. So it's really cool to be able to keep it all close. And it's still a very important part for us and something that we can do for fun and for the love of it. And, and still have a life, a full-time job and a family and a house.
Yeah, still doing all the things.
Oh yeah.
So talk a little bit about, like, how you stay inspired and get new ideas, like, for acting, for directing. Like, how do you keep it from, I don't know, just like rehashing the same thing over and over, or keep it from getting stale?
So it's all about educating yourself inside of the theater. Like there were, Brooke had mentioned the musical You're in Town. as a memorable role that she remembers me from. And so Urinetown is a fantastic musical, but it's a musical I knew nothing about until I auditioned for it. It's something that other people knew. So it's going to see, even though there are shows that you might love, like, and shows that everybody heard of, like Hamilton. Everybody's heard of Hamilton, and Hamilton is an unbelievable piece of theater. But there are other shows, even for me, that are just as good and sometimes even more powerful that might be lesser known. Excuse me. So it's all about going to see the titles that you don't know about, or researching the titles that you don't know about. I remember like one very specific production that Paul and I had seen years ago when we were dating. He used to review for Stage Magazine. We used to go to community theaters and he would review their shows. And it was a lot of our dates when we first started going out. But there was one show that we saw. It was a play. It was a 2-person play called Venus in Furs. And it was one of the most intriguing and intense pieces of theater. And this was 7 years ago, and it has still left this impression on me. Paul and I still talk about the night we went to see that show. And then we went to the bar afterwards, and we sat there for 3.5 hours going into this show, the script, the characters, the symbolism, the little details in the direction. So there's so many elements to any show that you really have to dig in and pick up on. And that's why I get so inspired, is because it doesn't matter what show or what book or what movie you're reading or looking at, all of those things are in there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's so good. So it happens that the last live theater I saw before COVID was Come From Away, which is a musical that's on Broadway, which is one of the few shows that you have not seen, I think, that I have seen.
I know, it's true. I've heard things about it, though. I want to see it.
So, but what I want to say about it is so I'm going to do a video just about this show and like what it meant to me. But basically, what was really interesting is sort of like, so it's one of those shows where like you laugh, you cry, like just every moment is like so emotionally charged and just like engaging. And it's just like, it takes place during the week of September 11th, 2001. So there's also this interesting layering that happens of like, you're seeing this experience that these people are having, but then you're remembering too, like what the experience that you were having like during that time. So it's really interesting in that way. And I remember like that whole weekend, because we went to New York City in January, pre-COVID, which is so wild now. But like, I was like looking up online, like looking for interviews with the writers and like looking up interviews with like some of the actors who were in it and just trying to learn more about like the decisions that they made. So like, for example, some of the things are just super intriguing. It's like, it's a cast of 12 actors, but together they play like 48 characters, right? So they're all playing like 4 or 5 characters. And they do it it's very simple in terms of the staging. So they change characters just by like adding a hat or like putting on a jacket and then like changing their affect. So like kind of watching that sort of shape shifting, super interesting. And like the article I read, the interview I read with 2 of the writers, they were talking about how they wanted to stage it as simply as possible. So the entire set is 12 chairs and 2 tables. And it becomes like an airplane, like they put all the chairs in a row, or it becomes like a pub where they set it up like a bar, right? Or it becomes like a cafeteria. And just like the way, just by moving that furniture, they can like make it this totally different space, right? So kind of like just like seeing the show is inspiring, but then like reading about it, like watching videos, like getting to hear interviews with them, like kind of adds that layer, like you were saying, or having a conversation with someone like after it. So I love that part of it too, where you get to see like all different interpretations.
Yes. And again, like it's that whole element of like the one person that changed the face of that project. Like, and it's, again, just an example, like a film example that Paul and I love to talk about. We love Back to the Future. It's one of our favorite movies, especially the original. But Michael J. Fox was not originally cast as Marty McFly. Eric Stoltz was. And Eric Stoltz actually shot a few scenes before he dropped out of the project, and they brought Michael J. Fox in. So you sit there and you wonder, like, would that movie been half as good if it was somebody else? Like, it's, you know what I mean? It's one of those wild things. So that's all the aspects I love about theater. Like, what about a project or about a character can change with another decision? You know?
Yeah. Super interesting. Okay. Let's see. How do you keep from getting burned out? Which is kind of a weird question now that we're in COVID, but you know, pre-COVID. How do you like keep it fresh and yeah.
So what I did start noticing after a little while, when I started to get the jobs with school and working with kids and trying to do my own shows, like being in shows, I was noticing a lot of burning out and getting run down. And I'm like, okay, this is starting to turn more into a burden than a joy. Like, what's going on with me? How do I fix that? And it was because I noticed that a lot of the projects that I was taking on were for other reasons other than just my pure love and joy and need.
Ooh, say more.
It,
so interesting.
So a lot, like, you know, some community theaters, if they do not, you know, get certain people that they want, or they're looking for more cast members, they'll reach out to people that they know who might not be busy and be like, hey, do you want to jump in either for this role or just into the ensemble and like help us out? And most of the times, if people did that for me, I would just be like, yeah, sure, like whatever, no problem. And I started noticing I was starting to say yes with projects that were just not good for me mentally and emotionally, for a lot of reasons. Either I had creative differences with people, or it was just shows I wasn't very interested in. That's the other thing. Like, I try really hard, especially with shows I direct, to find projects I'm going to be super passionate about and that I'm going to love so much, because then I just want to invest more time. And I love that. I'm always looking for the thing I want to invest my time in, or the role that I want to invest my time in. So with the example of this past, you know, winter with Cinderella, when that started rehearsing, I was directing the musical for St. Hubert's, which went up in December, and Cinderella would go up in February. So during the rehearsal time of Cinderella, I would have been directing 3 other shows while being in a show. So I sat and I thought, like, while working, yes, and working a full-time job. So it was a lot to think about. So it was the thing where I had to sit with myself and be like, okay, like, is this a show that I want to do just because I want to be in the show, or is it the role? And for Cinderella, it was specifically the role. I wanted the role of Cinderella. So what I did was I was just, you know, I was honest with my director, and I said, I am here for the role of Cinderella, and I appreciate that consideration. But if you choose somebody else, I will decline another role. But like, thank you for your interest.
Such a strong boundary.
It's, you know, and it's a boundary. I feel like that is very hard for people, especially in the arts and entertainment, because we're people pleasers. We like to
and there's this element of like, so Elijah just said to me the other day, because he learned this at camp, is that you get what you get and you don't get upset, right? Which is like, so, and I know that you've seen it. So let's talk more about this, because let's talk about it from the other side, because you've had students who wanted a specific role and then were like really upset when they didn't get it. So like, talk a little bit about that back and forth. Because like for you as an adult, you're kind of like, okay, like I have all these other things on my plate, and like in this instance, I want to be Cinderella, or I don't want to be in the show, and that's the boundary, and like this would be worth my time, but this wouldn't be. And now talk about it to me from like the other angle of like a middle or high school student who was the lead last year. They want to be the lead this year, because I know you've had this instance like several times. Because you, like, unlike some directors, don't just like automatically cast someone who was the lead last year as the lead this year. You really kind of look for the best person for the role. So talk about, like, as a student, like, what's the value in not getting the role that you were hoping for?
The value is understanding the industry. You know, like, so I always, with one particular student, that I had to deal with last fall. She was a lead when we did Little Mermaid, and then she still had a very nice role when we did Thoroughly Modern Millie last year, but it wasn't the role she wanted, and in her mind, it wasn't a big enough role considering the role she had just come away from.
Right.
So, you know, we sat and we talked about it a little bit, and I asked her, I said, you know, do you want to be an actor? Is that what you want? Like, do you want to grow up and do theater for your life work? And she was like, yes, I really do. I said, no is a word you really have to get used to then.
Yeah.
So, and I start to use this analogy with a lot of the kids. So, you know, a lot of the kids really right now, because of all of the different trends of things, I either use Ben Platt from Dear Evan Hansen and Pitch Perfect, or Lin-Manuel Miranda from Hamilton, or Jesse Mueller from Beautiful and Waitress.
Okay.
I pick out one of those three, and I'm like, do you think that just because, so like Ben Platt, do you think just because Ben Platt was Dear Evan Hansen means that he's going to go audition for the next show and get a yes?
Right.
Because it's not the way the industry works.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This reminds me of, actually, Susan Hyatt, who's a coach that we both love, did this great piece. This is like years ago when she was still doing the Go podcast. Like really taking us back here, but she was talking about oh my god, what's his name who originated Aaron Burr in Hamilton? It's like Leslie something.
Leslie Odom Jr.
Leslie Odom Jr. Okay, so he, right before he got the role of Aaron Burr, he was about to quit acting. Like he was unemployed for a long time, and he was just like, like no one wants to hire me. Like he was kind of like doing the moan, and he was talking to a mentor of his, and his mentor was like, well, who knows that you're looking for work? And he's like, what do you mean? Like, everyone knows, I complain about it all the time. And he's like, have you picked up the phone and called, like, you know, prior actors that you've worked with? Have you called prior directors? Like, right? Have you, like, are you putting yourself out there? Are you just like waiting for the next thing to like drop in your lap, right? And he was like, oh, so he starts making his calls, and then he gets cast as Aaron Burr. And then his whole career just like exploded.
So a funny story, just to go off of that for 1 second. Yeah. So during quarantine, I don't know if anybody watched the series Smash from NBC.
Yes, I watched
it. I know you did. With Megan Hilty and Catherine McPhee. It's an unbelievable show. But so Leslie Odom Jr. was in Smash, right? Yes, he was in Smash. And right after he left Smash to pursue other things, the show was canceled. So they were originally going to bring him back, but then the series didn't get picked up again. And during quarantine, they had actually streamed this concert version of Smash that they had recorded, like, I think back in 2015. And Leslie Odom Jr. was on there. They did an interview with a lot of the cast members, and he's on there, and he was like, well, you know, I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to come back for the concert because I was in rehearsals right before preview for Hamilton. So it was like, you know, he's like, I was really busy, but like they did let me off and I could come back and do this. But one of his cast members from Smash said, like, he was talking to him, he's like, you know, I'm doing this thing, it's about to go into previews, but I just got offered like this pilot audition for a TV show. He's like, I'm wondering, should I go do that instead? And his cast member looked at him and he said, this musical sounds awful. He's like, go do the TV pilot.
Oh, it's so wild because you never know.
Absolutely is, because you never know what the next thing is going to be. But you just have to, you know, like him, you go with your gut and you make the decision. And whether the decision is a good one or a bad one, if you want to be an actor, if you want to be in this industry, you have to pick yourself up and move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so true. Okay, so talk a little bit about, so everyone in the group is a writer, and I've told them this a million times, but I will repeat it again. So I always say that the act of writing is what makes you a writer. So it's not getting a book deal or having a bestseller badge or being a professor or whatever, like all these external things. It's just the act of writing makes you a writer, and that means that you are a creative, you are an artist, whether or not you own it for yourself, like that's what it means. So what, like, what are your thoughts on how people can use theater? Like right now, there's not as much live theater happening. So it might be like, I don't know, what are some ideas you have about how people can use theater to kind of inspire their own writing or just sort of like stay connected to a creative community and just like keep the juices flowing?
So I know a lot of theater groups right now who, since we can't be together to perform, they're doing a lot of like virtual readings
Oh,
over
fun.
Zoom,
That's great.
which has been very fun. So I did one of those in April, and we streamed it live, and it was very cool. Um, so I know a lot of theaters are doing that. I know a lot are considering now, depending on what areas they're in, doing smaller shows that maybe they've never had the opportunity to do because they want to try and cast as many people as possible.
Yep.
So they're taking these opportunities to do, like 2-person plays or 5-person shows or things like that, and working ways to try and keep them very socially distanced and, making sure that we all stay safe. And I know a lot of these, groups that are doing live performances are either having them outside, which again in theater is a very challenging aspect of the industry. So they're doing performances outside, or they're not having an audience in the room with them.
Okay.
They're filming and then they're streaming later, so that it's less people together, but you can still have the audience later. So it's all about just finding, I feel like, the right fit for you as well. Another thing that I was personally doing, trying to figure out my plan for the fall at St. Hubert's this year, was I was reading a lot of scripts, looking up shows I had never heard of, looking at these one acts that, and reading through them, like, making sure they were appropriate, but also like bookmarking a few for myself, like, oh, this is really funny, like I'll come back to this later for maybe an adult thing or like a workshop. So doing things, it's all about just finding things that are connections for you. Another thing that my husband and I did was we did a free 7-day trial subscription to Broadway HD.
Oh yes.
We watched like 5 Broadway shows in 4 days. It was great.
So fun. Yeah, well, so talk about that a little bit of like, so we're in this age of like streaming, you can stream like so many things. What is the value of live theater from your perspective when you can just sit at, like, aside from COVID aside, like what is the value in non-COVID times of live theater when you can just like stream a lot of Broadway shows or even just like watch Netflix? Like what's the value?
There's so much value in live theater. It's feeling when you get like a really great actor on the stage in front of you and they're doing something really funny or really vulnerable or really heart-wrenching. And that actor can channel all of that emotion and throw it not just to his co-star on the stage, but throw it all the way back to the back of the room, to the back of the mezzanine. So all you want to do is cry. Like there's nowhere else in the world that you can get that kind of feeling. Like there are brilliant movie actors that have made me cry, goodness knows how many times. But there is nothing for me like a good, honest, I am sitting in a live theater show, bawling my eyes out, cry. They are my favorite kind of cries.
Oh, I love everything you just said about that. And it reminds me, and I'm going to talk more about this in my video next week about like music as well. And so it reminds me of this, the movie Music and Lyrics with Hugh Grant. And so she like wants to be a novelist and her mentor has this like great like literary novel, whatever. And Hugh Grant wants her to write a pop song with him. And she's kind of like being a little snobbish about it, honestly. Like she's kind of like, well, I don't know. Like I want to be this great literary writer. And he's kind of like, I don't care like how good of a writer you are. Like no book can make you feel as good, as fast as I've got sunshine. And he like just breaks into song and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so true. And more specifically, I actually used a song from Come From Away in my writing retreat in February, which is like just pre-COVID. There's this song called Me in the Sky, and I'm going to talk more about it in my video, but basically like I play that song as a way of like just noticing what happens to your body in like the 3 minutes that she's singing that song, because that song alone, like you laugh, you cry, like it's just, it has so much emotional range to it. And seeing it live was just like, it just like blew my mind. It's just like this one tiny person, like all the way down there. And it's like, but like the waves of emotion that she could make you feel, it's just, like you said, it's like, there's nothing else like that. I mean, listening to the song is one thing, but like seeing that person like create that experience for a room of hundreds of people is just like, yeah, magic.
A huge like memory for me with that aspect, like feeling the live thing. So I don't know how many of you know, but like, so Brooke became a fan of the musical Les Mis. How old were you? 12, 13,
12.
something like that. So when I was little, the only song I knew from Les Mis was Castle on a Cloud, because that was the song the little girl sang. So I was like, But so I always knew the soundtrack was there, but you know, and when she went to college, she left it in her room. So I pulled it out one day and I'm like, all right, like let's put it in. Let's see what the big deal is. Mm-hmm. And I remember then from that day on listening to the music so much, so often, and loving just the music so much and wanting to see it live. And I had probably been listening to it for 3 years before my parents finally got me tickets to go see it in Philadelphia. And I will never forget sitting in the theater, feeling the vibration of the orchestra starting with the dun 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 dun, and I lost it. I immediately tears are streaming down my face. My mom is laughing at me.
My gosh. Okay. So this is so beautiful because Les Mis is one of the first professional musicals that I remember seeing. And I was like maybe 12. Like, so if I started listening to it when I was 10 or 11, maybe it was the same. It was like, it was like 1 or 2 years later and mom and dad took me to see it. So I love that they took you like separately. It's really special. But I had the same thing. Like I still remember sitting there during Javert's solo, which I can't remember the name of it right now. You're going to know
Stars or Suicide or his Suicide.
Yeah, it's the Suicide one. And I just remember like, so he's like, the idea is he's standing on the dam and he's like, I can't go on. Like, I can't go on. And I remember the way that they lit that scene, they had the lights spiral so it looked like rushing water. And I was just like, they made it look like real water. Like I like couldn't get over it at like 12 years old. Like I was just like, this is the coolest thing ever.
They did something similar to that when I saw it. So they had a bridge. And he was walking on the edge of the bridge, like during the whole song. And then the end, when there's no way I can go on, he jumps off and they zoom the bridge up. Wow. So it looked like he fell. And then all of a sudden and then he's like in slow motion and the lighting was very like looking like he's underwater.
Oh, cool.
Like, again, these are the things that stick with you. Like, you remember them years and years later. And everything that you see then will compare to that one time where it's stuck.
Well, and what you said about the moment, like when they started playing the overture and you were like, oh my God. Okay. So I remember being obsessed with Aida, the Disney musical. And like we had the soundtrack and we listened to it and mom and dad got us tickets for Christmas. And so we went to see it. And I just remember like we were sitting like on the floor, just maybe like 5 or 6 rows back.
It was very close.
We were sitting stage left. I remember exactly where we were sitting. And I just remember like looking at the set and I was like, I can't believe we're here. Like, this is so special. And the people in front of me turned around and they were like, wow, like we're even more excited now. Like, cause we don't even know what the show is about. But I was like, went on this thing. I was like, I just love this show so much and the music. And I can't believe like we're here and I can see the stage. And I was just like freaking out. And then I had this great memory where, cause that show was just like amazing. And I remember talking to, cause afterwards, I don't know if you remember this, but we picked up Maria, our cousin.
Yeah.
And she drove back to Philly with us.
You had a musical that night. You were in a show.
I was in a show that night. That's true. I was in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. That is a true story. So, but anyway, so I remember talking to Maria about it on the way home. And she was like, she must have still been in college at the time. So she was at NYU at the Tisch School for theater. And she saw shows all the time. And I remember she was like, she was like, oh, like Aida is my favorite show on Broadway right now. And I was like, I love that you can say like, it's my favorite show on Broadway right now. But I remember she and I had this whole conversation about how that particular show, a lot of the action happened at the front of the stage. Oh, sorry. And we were stage right, actually. And she was like, a lot of the action would happen like right in front of where we were sitting. Like it was kind of concentrated, like right in front of us. And I remember she told me this great story where she got like a discount single orchestra seat ticket for like a weeknight. And she went and she was in the first row, and she said she was talking to the conductor because he just like came out and he was just like chatting with her. And it turned out that he had written the score like he had helped like write the score with like Elton John, and it's Elton John, wasn't it?
Elton John, Tim Rice.
Tim Rice, yeah, I thought so. So he had like helped write the score, right? So, and she said he didn't even have a score to direct. He just knew it in his head. He said she said he just had a picture of his kids sitting on the music stand, and he just had it all like in his brain. Like he just like didn't even need the music at all. And I was like, that is so cool. So some good stuff.
It's great stuff. It's great
Okay,
stuff.
we need to tell the story about the Lion King before we wrap this up.
Great story.
You want to tell the story?
Great. We'll go back and forth. We were different ages at the time.
God.
I was 8. How old were you?
So I was like 14. No.
Yeah.
How,
roughly.
Yeah. About, yeah.
Something like that. Something like that. So the Lion King was the first Broadway show I think that either of us had seen.
Yes.
And our mom was super obsessed with the soundtrack for like a really long time because we had been, I remember why too. We had been to Disney World the Christmas before, and that was when they started the Festival of the Lion King,
Yes.
Animal Kingdom.
Good.
And it was inspired by the Broadway show. So mom was like, this is so cool. Like, we gotta see it. Like, we gotta see it. So our dad surprised her that Christmas with tickets for all of us to go see the show, but not until the next November. So he gave her the tickets in like
Christmas.
1999 or something like that, or 2000, and we were going the next year. So mom had it on the calendar. She's like crossing off days. Like she was so excited.
Yeah, we did a whole weekend in New York. Like this was the first time we had ever done a weekend trip to New York City.
It's the first time I had ever been to New York City.
Yeah, super
like
exciting.
We were so ready. We were so excited. So we got in Friday night. We had a great night. We went to Central Park the next day. We took a carriage ride. Like we did all of the touristy New York stuff. It was great. And then we went back to the hotel to get ready for the show, got our tickets, got dressed, got to the theater, and we go up to the mezzanine where our seats were supposed to be. We give the guy our tickets, and we're about to walk in, and the usher said, actually, guys, could you move over to the side for a minute?
And I was like, what's wrong? Why are we moving over to the side?
Yeah, me, I'm just like, why are we going in?
Yeah, I was starting to freak out immediately.
So a couple minutes go by, they let everybody in, they shut the doors, and the usher turns to Dad and he said, sir, I am so sorry. These tickets were for last week's performance.
Oh my God. Cue wailing and gnashing of teeth. And I was like, I remember being so upset. And the guy was like, it's okay. He was like, I remember he said, he's like, you're going to be able to see the show. And we were like, okay. And he's like, just wait here for a minute. Right. And then he had the manager come over and he's like, okay. He's like, as everyone's getting settled, we're going to see if there's any open seats, if anyone didn't show up today, and we'll like see if we can put you in. And if at the worst, like you can stand in the back, like you're going to be able to see the show today. And I remember he was so nice. He was like, you wouldn't believe how often this happens. It happens all the time.
Yes, all the time. He
said. Have their tickets for like a year or 2 years, and like then it just happened. So then, can I tell the next part?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
So then we're standing in the back of the mezzanine, and we're like, I'm like trying to calm down and whatever. And he came back and he was like, come with me. And so our original seats were like in the back of the mezzanine. So he's like, come with me. So he walks us downstairs, and he had put in like 4, like, they were almost like big, like dining chairs, like almost for like a formal dining room.
It was actually, they were the seats for the orchestra members.
Oh my God, I didn't even realize that. Okay, so he had taken orchestra member seats and like just put them right in the back behind the last row of the orchestra. So suddenly we have better seats than we were originally supposed to have, right? Yes. So now we are like, Oh my gosh, this is like just the coolest experience ever. And so, and when, if you've seen The Lion King, you know, in the opening scene during Circle of Life, the animals walk down the orchestra row aisles and up onto the stage. So now there's like a giant elephant that's made of like 3 or 4 people like walking by, and there's like giraffes that are like 12 feet tall, just like walking right next to us, like down the orchestra aisles. And so then at the end of the show, he comes back and we say thank you. And we're just like gushing about how amazing the show was. And he's like, do you want to come backstage?
I think I ran,
Oh
if
my
I
God,
recall.
so tell
I
about going backstage.
He was like, come on, like, come back. Like, let me show you, like, everything. So we got to see a lot of the animatronics, like the way that Pride Rock would come up from out of the stage. He took us to the back to show us where they were hanging, like, certain props and certain costumes. And then the coolest thing, you have to remember this, was we were standing on stage about to leave, and he goes, oh, why don't you meet one of our actors? And the actor who played Zazu, like, came over and was, like, chatting with us for, like, 10 minutes.
Oh my God.
It was so nice.
I remember he was showing us too, like we were like walking down this hallway and there was like a door open and there was someone in there getting a massage. Do you remember this? And he was,
I don't know.
yeah. So all the hyenas, because they have to like the whole show, they're kind of like this. They got to have a massage after every performance. Awesome. It was like so good.
Maybe like I'll be a hyena.
I know, totally. Oh my gosh. So magical. Okay, this was like the most fun ever. Any closing thoughts about the power of theater, living a creative life, staying inspired?
I say this to all of my kids after every show that I direct, specifically like to my 8th graders and my seniors or whoever. But if you have something creative that is important to you, whether it be acting or directing, filmmaking, writing, whatever it may be, remember to keep it close. There's a reason that it's important now, and it'll continue to be important in the future. So no matter how you decide to hold it close to you, whether you want to continue the way you're doing it now, or you just want to be, you know, a show goer or an avid reader or a frequent movie goer, anything like that, keep it close. Find the reason and the best way for you to do so, and make sure it stays there, because it's important.
So good. Thank you so much. This is like the most fun ever.
Thank you. Right. I have to just tell everybody too before we go, you need to understand how giddy I was when Brooke asked me to do this. Like, my sister's wants to interview me, like, for her writing page. Like, she's one of my biggest inspirations. So it's, you know.
Thank you, honey. And I love that. I was like, hey, would you be interested in like doing this thing? And you were like, is that a real question? And I was like, no, I don't know why I phrased it as a question. I was like, because I knew that you would say.
You didn't even phrase it. You pitched me. You pitched to me. I was like, why? It was great. And I loved it. And I love you.
I love you too. Oh my gosh. All right, everyone. Stay inspired. Love to all of you. Peace out.
Thank you.
All right. We stopped the live stream.